What's up everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Caleb, formerly known as Popo Patty on social media, and today I want to share my horrific experience with you. I'm going to walk you through it step by step so that hopefully you will never have to experience what I did. Please use this as a learning tool and be safe out there. Now, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone that reached out, everyone that helped on scene, from the guys that did the communication, to my buddy Vlad who did a lot of the first aid, to my friend Chris that ran up with the AED afterward. Glad I didn't need that. And then the nurses, the pilots, the hospital staff, my awesome wife, my kids, my church family, everyone that helped with getting the car back to my house. Like, so many people helped in so many ways, and I cannot truly thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. I couldn't have gotten through all this without you, and I know I didn't thank everyone still because there were so many people that I'm not even aware were there. Looking back at pictures, I'm like, I didn't see that guy. I don't remember that guy being there, but they were, and they were doing stuff for me, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, and above all, I thank God for preserving my life and giving me a second chance here on earth. Now in this video, I'm going to objectively break down what happened to me on Friday, February 23rd at approximately 1:30 p.m. I will be walking you through the entire event from my point of view at the time of the incident with what I knew at the time. This will include my thoughts and my emotions. Then we're going to pan out. We're going to look at it from a 20/20 hindsight and go over what went wrong, talk about the aftermath, and what I learned about the failures that occurred. My goal is not to point blame anywhere or at anyone except myself. I will be going over the facts as I know them to be based on video evidence, physical evidence, and my personal recollection of events. I have consulted with industry leaders who reached out to get their opinions based on my evidence and recollection. They have no stake in the game and gave me honest feedback, which I greatly appreciate. Thanks again. After this, I will be going over the lessons learned and things that were done right, and hopefully bring up real reminders for us on the importance of communication and first aid on the trail. My only goal in this is to get the story as true as I can to help others be safe out on the trail. My only ask is that you watch the video from start to finish. As with any event, this is a chain, and if you were to skip one of the links, you miss the true picture. I will provide clips and pictures of the incident throughout. Keep in mind that blood is shown, first aid is shown, as well as bruising and other injuries. I have the moment itself on clear drone footage, which will be shown. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, before we dive in real quick, guys, I want to give you a brief history of who I am. This isn't to self-promote or identify me as an expert, which I'm clearly not, but purely to show that this can happen to anyone, and we need to make sure that we are never complacent. Now, I'm 29 years old, okay, at the time of watching this video. My birthday is actually on March 4th, so it's coming up. Happy birthday, me. And I grew up in the mountains of Honduras, which is in Central America, and I learned to drive. My first vehicle at 18 years old, which is the driving age there, was on a 1979 BJ42, which is a diesel Land Cruiser stick shift. That is my first driving experience. And then in Honduras, everything there is wheeling, everything there is off-roading, quote unquote. It's all dirt roads that get washed out through the mountains all the time. I then transitioned back to the States, and I spent several years just, having a blast, just cruising around, doing a lot of car stuff. I've always been a car guy. And then I got back into off-roading in 2018, which I've been doing ever since. I own a 1958 Willys Jeep Cabover FC150. I own a 1996 Jeep XJ that's been on the Rubicon at least a dozen times. I have the 21 Ford Bronco that I've had for 2 years now. I do a lot of the work myself on both the Jeep and the Bronco. I work as a trail guide at times for different organizations on the Rubicon. I wheel all over the United States for fun all the time. I put on a Bronco Academy for a lot of new people, and I just wheel literally almost every weekend. as much as I can. I'm out there. Rubicon's in my backyard. I'm always going out doing a lot of stuff. I've got about 200 recoveries under my belt. I'm not an expert, but I'm not a noob. Just a good reminder to not get complacent and not just be okay with status quo. Okay, well, now we're going to start talking about the event itself. I prolonged it long enough. You guys are all here for this moment. Here we go. Thank you for watching so far. Well, I went snow wheeling, okay? So just like any other day, normal snow wheeling day. I'm out there having a blast, doing some shenanigans with my Bronco group, which I lead. It's about 1,300 members. We do a lot of Bronco events. So we're doing a snow run, just like any other snow run. Got 18 Broncos. We're going up into the mountains. It's a trail that's normally asphalt, but it gets covered in snow. It's not plowed in the winter. It's a pretty easy trail, and it's short. So we go up to the top of the mountain. I'm in my element. For people that ask, no, I was not drinking. I do not believe in drinking and driving, especially on the trails or anywhere for that matter. And no, I don't do drugs. So just get that out of your mind right out of the bat. Don't do drugs, kids. And then anyway, having a blast, out there having fun. We turn around after the event concluded. We're coming back down the trail, having a blast. I let the group get ahead of me. I'm just cruising. My friend throws up the drone, and I decide to start picking up some speed and just having a blast in the snowbanks. And eventually came off the road and sunk down a little bit into a snowbank, which happens. Having fun. My group is ahead of me. I radio up and I'm like, hey guys, can someone come get me? And a friend of mine starts to turn around to come and get me. And that's when I saw a Jeep coming up from behind me. So this Jeep comes up, he kind of cruises up next to me. He had passed us earlier, we had said hello. And I was like, hey, can you give me a tug? Kind of stuck, and it's quicker than waiting for my group to come up. Never met the guy before, and he was super cool, and he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I did all the hooking up. I hooked up to my rear D-ring on my rear bumper and used a kinetic rope and hooked that up to his front end, which was I honestly don't remember what type of front recovery point he had. It was either a D-ring or a D-ring mount, a clevis, so to speak. The front did not appear to be sharp at all, just a normal clevis. Mounted through it on the kinetic, and he gave me about 2 pulls from what I can remember and pulled me back about 15 feet. But the back end just kept sliding and I wasn't coming back out onto the trail. So we kind of reevaluated and we're like, yeah, let's try the front. We've got about 15 feet of track now in front of me. Let's try the front. So he pulls up in front of me. I had disconnected. I reconnected the kinetic rope, and this time I connected to the front, one of these D-rings, but on the driver's side, on the front bumper that I have. And I did a soft shackle, one of my really nice, expensive new soft shackles that I just bought. It's like an $80 soft shackle, American made, and hooked that up on my end. And then on the other end, I just grabbed the first soft shackle out of my Bronco that I could see. It was right in the very top, picked it up. It was an Amazon one that I bought about a year and a half ago, approximately. And my mindset at this point is I'm like, okay, I gotta go. My group's getting ahead of me. They're waiting for me, whatever it may be. I don't want to hold them up. I'm a little upset that the back 2 poles didn't get me up on the road. And I'm just like, I got to get back up. I got to get back in the game. So I'm hurrying. I ran over to his Jeep that was parked waiting for me. Went to the rear recovery point on his bumper. He had an aftermarket rear bumper on his Jeep. I remember noticing his Jeep was really souped up. I could hear, I don't know what kind of engine it was. Could have been the exhaust. It sounded like a V8, but it wasn't. It wasn't a stock Jeep by any means. This thing was older and it was lifted. It had like this is based on my recollection. It had bypass shocks, 40-inch tires is what it appeared like. I was on 37s and his were bigger than mine, so I assumed 40. It was a 2-door. It was a hefty little Jeep for what it was. It looked like the guy had some money into it. So I remember going up to his rear bumper with the kinetic, and he didn't have any D-rings on his rear clevis points. And the clevis point was about an inch. I remember it being about an inch wide. And I'm like, you know what? It's not going to be that much to get me out. I'm in the tracks already. I threw the soft shackle through the clevis, hooked it up to the kinetic like I do every single time, the proper way, with the knot and the loop on the right end, just like they show in the pictures on all the soft shackles to do. Ran back to my Bronco, got in, gave him the good old thumbs up. Never talked to him during that time. I'm just like in the mood of like, let's go, let's go. This is quick, this is easy, done this 100 times, let's get out of here. And then I remember hearing his engine spool up and being like, oh man, he's kind of sending it on this one. I remember all 4 tires spinning, him just sending it, and a massive yank where both me and my passenger we just lurched like really heavily. I heard stuff crashing around in the back, and I'm like, crap, that was hard. And I remember mentioning to my passenger how hard that pull was, and my passenger was like, whoa. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't like these kind of pulls. And by that time, well, I'm like, crap, like that was hard. I looked out real quick. He was reversing towards me, and I looked at my driver's side, and my driver tire is now out of the snowbank, and it looks like it's out on the road, but I'm still stuck. I don't have any traction, and I can't go backwards or forwards. And I'm like, okay, I'm still stuck, but I'm barely stuck. I'm like so close, and still in that rushed mindset. Let's go, let's go, let's get this done. I gave him another thumbs up. He gave me a thumbs up, and then he went again. And this time, he went harder. We took off, and I remember seeing him take off, and in my mind, in that split moment, I distinctly remember going, oh crap. He hit the end of the line. There was a massive lurch. I felt like a whiplash motion in my neck, and then there was the loudest crack that I've ever heard in my life. It was like a whip cracking, but magnified 100-fold. And then I heard a crash, and then I felt like I got hit by a truck. Lights flashed in my eyes. I did not lose conscious, and I actually distinctly remember everything. The loud crack, the heavy hit, the lurching, and then just pain like I've never felt before. And I remember it all being concentrated on the side of my neck, the right side of my neck. And this all happened really fast. I quickly looked up and saw there's a hole in my windshield. I don't remember seeing anything else out the front. And then I felt warm stuff dripping, and I felt like something is wrong. Like something is really wrong. And I looked down, and I saw blood just dripping onto my seat, onto my center console, down my arm. Sorry. And then I put my hand to the side of my neck, and I brought it back, and it was just covered in blood. And my first thought, as I'm watching the blood drip down within a matter of like 2 seconds, 3 seconds after this happened, is I just cut my jugular, my artery, and I'm going to be dead in about 12 to 15 seconds. I distinctly remember that thought. I was 100% convinced I am going to die. I have an experience in, not in the medical field, but in a lot of trauma in the field with gunshot wounds and stuff. And I've seen people bleed out, and I know how quick it is and what will do it. And I saw the blood, and it was a lot, and it was all coming out, and I'm like, I'm dead. And distinctly remember praying, oddly calm at the moment, like that first state of like, crap, what happened, to realizing what happened or what I thought had happened. My brain processed it, and I was at peace. I'm like, okay. The pain went away. I had no pain at that time, and I was like, I'm gonna die. It's okay. I know where I'm going. And And then kind of a fight or flight hit, and I'm like, no, I'm going to fight this. And then I got out of the vehicle, and I put my hand on, this all happened in seconds. I put my hand on my neck, put an incredible amount of pressure on my neck that I didn't know I was capable of, and started screaming at my buddy, hey, I need medical, medical, medical. The guy was getting out of his Jeep, kind of nonchalantly walking up. No idea that I got hurt, so I don't blame him. And I'm like, I need to go now. And he's like, wait, what, huh? And I'm like, I need to go. You need to give me a ride out of here. I got to go to the hospital. My buddy grabbed his medical kit. He started ripping out all kinds of stuff. Got some combat gauze, got some regular medical gauze, slapped it on my neck, told me to hold it. I started holding it like never before. Blood is still dripping down, and I'm like I see the patch of blood in the snow. I go over to the guy's Jeep. I sit down against his Jeep. Don't know why I went over there. My brain went over there, sat down, made another blood pile at his Jeep in the snow. Remember getting blood on his seat. And my friend started cutting my shirt, and I'm so thankful. I remember thinking like how happy I was. I just taken off my favorite sweater because he was cutting through, and I'm like, crap, I'm glad it's not my sweater he's cutting. And we sit down. He looks at it, and I say, how bad is it? Surprised I'm not dead yet. And he goes, it's bad, but I don't think it's your jugular. And he said, you got a gash in the right side of your neck, and it's bleeding, but it's not that dark blood that you'd expect from your major artery. And I'm like, and that's my first time thinking, okay, maybe I have a chance. And I was still praying in my mind, still calm, and I started focusing on breathing. Just started sitting down, deep breaths, trying to get my heart rate down so I could bleed less. And then he's giving me pressure. I'm asking, can we go? Can we go? I got to get to the hospital. Still thinking like I cut something important and I'm going to still bleed out if we don't get to a hospital. And they're like, no, let's call air vac. And so the guy came up, one of the other Jeepers came up, and he had his radio on him, his ham radio. And I remember him saying, do you want me to call you a helicopter? And I was like, yes, yes, call me a helicopter. And then at that time, while he was calling the helicopter on his ham radio, they looked, saw that the gauze wasn't quite enough. So my friend got my medical kit, went through all that, threw it all over the snow, and then got my gauze out, started packing that. I'm still holding all this pressure on my neck. I held it there for about 45 minutes, and I got really, really sore in my left elbow. I remember being super sore holding it. So we're waiting for the helicopter. I'm holding that. He's talking, my buddy's talking to me. Other people came up, we're talking, and they're like, hey, it's been like 20 minutes. You're gonna be okay. The bleeding has now stopped. And I'm like, okay, just focus on breathing, focus on breathing. They asked if I wanted to let my wife know, so they radioed somebody down in the valley on the ham, asked them to call my wife. They did get my name wrong. They called my wife and said, Jacob has had an accident, and he's being air flighted to a hospital. We had asked them to say, whoever it was had been asked to say non-life-threatening, to not freak her out. I have a 2-week-old and a 2-year-old at home, and somehow that part didn't go out, and they called me Jacob instead. Not blaming them. It was a stressful situation. I remember repeating my name multiple times, and they kept repeating back to me, Jacob, your name's Jacob? And I remember saying, no, Caleb. They still said Jacob. It's okay. It's okay. So my wife got a call from a stranger saying, Jacob is going to the hospital, got air flighted. And she's like, who's Jacob? But then the person later called back and corrected himself. And he was like, sorry, it was Caleb. And then for about 30 minutes, my wife told me that she thought I was going to die because she had no update other than I was in an off-road accident and I was getting life flighted to the hospital. So she's figured out her child care on her end. But anyway, my perspective at the time, I'm not waiting for this helicopter, and it takes a while, or at least it seemed like it took forever for this helicopter to show up. And eventually I heard it come in. I couldn't really move my head a lot. And I remember a lot of like pain starting to set in now, aching in my shoulder. The side of my neck was on fire, like intense fire. And my buddy checked it again. He's like, yeah, you're definitely gashed. Oh, by the way, there's some bleeding on your chin. Let's put some pressure there too. So I'm like, I'm not concerned about the chin. I think I'm okay there. I'm concerned about the gash in my neck. And it's on fire and it hurts really bad. And he's like, no, just cover the chin too. I'm like, okay, so I'm covering the chin now. And then I remember my buddy Chris coming up, and he had a big old backpack, and I know he carries an AED, and he had an AED with him, and I remember him saying distinctly in my mind, it's okay guys, I have the AED. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I do not need an AED. I am not going to die. I'm going to be fine. Like, thanks, but no thank you. I remember thinking that. I didn't say it, but I remember thinking it. Helicopter took forever to land, it seemed, but it finally landed. They were worried about the snow, understandably. And they landed, and took a minute to kind of figure out how to get me into the hospital. Into the helicopter with the sled and the contraptions and all that. I was able to kind of walk out, sit down. Everyone kind of helped cart me over. People were making like a little runway for the helicopter. It's pretty cool. And they got me in the helicopter. We took off, and en route to the hospital, I'm trying to crack jokes I'm starting to realize, like, I think I'm gonna be okay. I think I'm gonna live. And I'm cracking jokes with the helicopter people. They weren't really reciprocating that much, and I think it's just they were focused on their job. I understand. Get to the hospital. They bring me down into the emergency room from the top. It's a very interesting experience, landing on top of a hospital and getting carted down an elevator and all that. And they bring me to the emergency room intake, and I'm holding this thing on my neck still. On the flight on the flight in the helicopter, one of the nurses actually took over holding it. And after about 5 minutes, got tired, and I said, "It's okay, I got it." And like, sure. And like, I've been holding it for 45 minutes already. So I started holding it again and held it the rest of the way. So we get into the emergency room, and they cart me into the front, and there's a line of like 10 ambulances in front of me. Ambulance, like the beds that they bring in out of the ambulance with patients in them, all in the ER. And I'm like, can I get seen? And they said, we got to wait in this line for about however long it takes. It could be 2 hours. And I'm like, so I have to sit here holding my neck closed for 2 hours waiting to get seen whether or not I'm going to like have internal bleeding and die or whatever. And they're like, yeah. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, the people in front of me are sick, but they're not bleeding out. I possibly am bleeding out. So I asked, please send someone to look at me, a doctor that can make a determination. And a doctor came out, looked at me and said, yeah, take him into the room right now. And I was like, thank you so much. Very surreal experience. And apparently there's like a gray area because they didn't know if I was going to bleed out or not. So they didn't know if I was trauma or not. You don't go to the front of the line unless you're trauma. And they're just like, well, can you check to see if I'm trauma? It's very interesting. Anyway, go to the room, and they check me, and then while they're checking me in the room, they're cleaning the blood and they're looking, and they go, your neck's not cut. And I'm like, what do you mean my neck's not cut? My buddy told me twice and looked at it and said it was gashed open. So remember the little chin cut I wasn't worried about? When the rope hit me, it split open so the rope, it hit me in the shoulder, full force in the shoulder, and then shot past me. And as it's shooting past me at whatever freaking speed it was going, it was rubbing on my neck. When it was rubbing on my neck, it created an intense, like, second-degree rug burn on my neck. It rubbed my skin raw and ripped multiple layers off and broke the skin on my chin, like a decent gash on my chin. Not just broke, it's gash. And the swelling from my neck, it swelled up so fast that it was this massive crease on the side of my neck. The blood was spurting out of my chin, running down through my beard out of sight, and then into the crease, and then coming out of the crease. And so everyone thought the crease was my gash and that it was bleeding, when in reality all the blood was coming from my chin that we weren't even worried about for the longest time. So grateful to God, and looking back on it, it's kind of hilarious. Still extremely painful, but no way life-threatening. Got the whole 9 yards done at the hospital. No broken bones, no internal trauma, just a massive bruise this big. At the end of the day, after like day 2, it was huge. It was black, purple, and yellow. And then, it still hurts. And then 2nd-degree burns all right side of my neck. All the skin was peeled up. And chin was split open, which they had to stitch. And that was it. That was on Friday, and it's currently Thursday, not even a week later, and here I am. It's incredible. I went home the same night from the hospital. I am beyond blessed, thankful to God, and thankful to everyone that helped me get through that. It was an extremely stressful, yet at the same time surreal time. Breathing got me through it, praying got me through it, my friends got me through it, and cracking jokes with anyone and everyone around me. My wife commented later that in the hospital, she never seen me crack so many jokes and talk to so many people, because I'm not normally a talkative person. And it's because I was trying to keep my mind off of it. And yeah, it affected me. Like, I don't know if you could tell, but just talking about it, it affects me a little bit, because that experience of believing beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're about to die and accepting it is intense. It's very intense. And I wish that on no one. But at the same time, having that peace, knowing that like Christ has saved me, and I'm going to heaven, I'm going to see him, and I'll see my wife and kids again there, is comforting, very comforting. And so scary, but peaceful at the same time. And yeah, that's the story from my perspective with my emotions at the time. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. Okay, so now we're going to go through lessons learned and mistakes made and how to prevent this, hopefully, from happening to you, because I initially was flabbergasted at how the heck this happened. I thought I did everything right. Well, no, sorry, I rephrased that. I didn't think I did everything right. I know I skipped corners, but I didn't think I did anything so dangerous that that would happen. You never see online, looking back afterward, I'm researching and looking up online, I don't see really a lot of instances where kinetic ropes went through a freaking windshield. Okay, I've seen D-rings go through them. I've seen tow balls go through them, winch lines with a hook on the end, but a rope? Never seen it. So let's go through some stuff that happened, some stuff I found out after the fact, some physical evidence, some video evidence, and kind of walk through it. So the first lesson, slow down. Slow way down. Like I said, I was rushed. That was my mindset. I wanted to get back out. If we take the time in our recoveries off-road and in a lot of stuff that we do in life, if we take the time to just assess and plan, it'll be so much safer. It is not something that should get rushed. If I had slowed down and been like, okay, that pull was really hard, or hey, that pull didn't get me out like I thought it would. Let's get out, let's reassess. Let's kind of figure out if there's something else we got to do. I know I didn't feel like doing it, but shoveling might have helped prevent all that shock load, because some things I found out afterward, again, this is 2020 hindsight now, something I didn't know at the time, was that my passenger end was buried in the snow after that first front pull. So if I had gotten out, taken the time to assess after the pull, look around, I would have seen I'm no longer in those tracks that I thought were in front of me. That first pole pulled me through all those tracks and then sunk my passenger end up to here almost in snow. Not on the driver's side that it looked out of. I could see my tire was clear on the driver's side, but if I gone out, I've seen that the passenger side was sunk. And theoretically, I would have assumed front pole is not good right now. The other thing that I would have probably done is shovel or pull back or winch. Those would have been much better options than another pole. Another pole was, that second pole was stupid, but I didn't know it because I didn't get out and assess, and that's on me. The other thing is communicate. Talk to the guy that's going to pull you or gal. If you're doing recovery, everyone involved in the recovery has to communicate so everyone's on the same page. After that first hard pull, I should have been like, hey dude, I'm not okay with that heavy of a pull. That makes me uncomfortable. Instead, I pushed it out of my mind and I'm like, it's okay, it's kinetic, we're almost there, it's not going to be a hard pull, and everything's going to be okay, you can take it, which obviously wasn't the case. So communicate. Please communicate. Next thing is pull strength, which you already kind of talked about. Kinetic pulls, I'm no expert, I'm not teaching you, but definitely not. But kinetic pulls should not be balls to the wall, massive yank on that rope. Everyone likes to say yank. I'm guilty of saying it. It shouldn't be a hard yank. Pulls are okay, but not that hard of a yank. And it's hard to explain how hard it was because in the video it's from a distance and it doesn't really show it very well. But if you're getting close, his tires are spinning, the engine's spooling up. I remember hearing it rev, and I remember feeling that jolt. And being on the back end of a lot of recoveries, that was the hardest jolt I've ever felt. The next thing I want to talk about is equipment. I was using, and I'll show you, this exact shackle on the Jeep side. This is what failed. I was using this shackle on the Bronco side. Now this shackle did have a sleeve on it. It was placed through the D-ring, or not the D-ring, the clevis. It was placed through the clevis, like so, and hooked. If you look closely in the pictures of this shackle, it failed at the loop that goes around this knot. This is an Amazon shackle, 1.5 years old, rated to, they have 2 different ratings on their page. They say it's max braking strength of 55,000 pounds and a max braking strength of 38,000 pounds on the same description. So that should be a red flag right there. The braids are loose and thick, and it's not really that degraded UV wise. It's actually pretty decent condition. It looks bad now because it just got shredded, but it's not really that bad. It's just these shackles, you can't really trust the quality because it's coming from a country where it could possibly have been made by a 10-year-old. Like, you don't know. And there's no quality control. There's no official testing on these. It's given a baseline rating that someone wrote down for whatever reason, and you can't trust the source. And as I found out, you definitely can't trust the source. American-made shackles, though, come from 2 factories, 1 or 2 factories in the United States, made with higher quality rope that's serialized, and you can trace the rope to each factory and when it was made by who it was made, which is pretty impressive. They all have serial numbers on them. And they also have much better coating, saturating them to help prevent them from decaying with time from UV or moisture or what have you. And the braiding is much tighter. So you have a better quality rope, tightly braided, and a product that has quality control. So you know what you're getting is what you got, so to speak. Suffice that to say, I'm not buying Amazon brand soft shackles ever again. And I don't recommend you do that either. I'm not telling you to buy from any certain companies, but I no longer trust nor will use soft shackles from Amazon. That's for sure. The other thing I wanted to talk about is recovery point failure. So the main question that everyone wants to know is what happened? Well, obviously I chose a bad location to put a soft shackle. This clevis is for a D-ring, right? So imagine this clevis on the Jeep side. It's a very similar clevis with a very similar radius. And instead of putting a D-ring in that clevis, which I should have, I put my soft shackle through it, and it has a sharper edge than you should use for a soft shackle. Now, have others used those clevises for soft shackles for years and been fine? Yeah. But as you can see, it can and will fail on the right type of pull and pressure. And when it fails, it is not pretty. Now, a lot of people say, well, use the wrong rope, the wrong soft shackle. Yes, that does come into play as well. I have a 1" by 30 rope that I used, kinetic rope, rated at 30% stretch with a breaking strength of 34,000 pounds. The soft shackle, even on the lower end of what it advertised, was 38,000 pounds. So theoretically, on a proper typical pull, the kinetic rope should fail before the shackle fails, which is good. You want that kinetic rope to fail in the middle somewhere versus on the end, because if it's in the middle, you won't have all that tension coming back and you won't have that missile of a knot at the end. But if your soft shackle fails first, well, this is what happens. So definitely recovery points, equipment, where you got it, inspect it regularly, make sure everything's up to par. But the failure point, ironically, is not as people expect. The most common comment I've seen is soft shackle failed because of mounting point. Now, I'm not saying that's not true, but an interesting thing happened on that second pull. So when the pull happened, essentially the clevis right here, hopefully you can see it, the clevis on my Bronco, on the driver's side, got pulled so hard from that pull that the part where it mounts to, this clevis goes into the bumper, has an angled piece of metal that comes off the back, and then has 2 grade 8 massive bolts that go through the side of it that hold it into the bumper and also into the vehicle's frame horn via 3 more bolts. That pull was so hard, the frame horn on my Bronco twisted, allowing the bumper to move out 1.5 inches on the driver's side. That's right, the entire bumper right now is twisted out 1.5 inches because the frame horns themselves twisted on my frame, on the Bronco's frame, due to the force of that pull. And then after the frame horn bent, then the next thing that came up to bat was the mounting of the clevis on this bumper. The clevis sheared at its mount inside the bumper. It sheared 90% through that angle metal that was holding it in place. After it sheared, the whole thing twisted forward and tried to slip out of its slot and go shooting out towards the Jeep, which would have been an even worse story. When it pulled out, after it sheared, the 2 bolts holding it into the bumper pulled out of their threads. When those bolts came out of their threads, the clevis hit this outer shell of the bumper in an attempt to rock it out and either kill or destroy my buddy's Jeep or himself. And not my buddy, but the guy going by. And when it hit it wedged in the outer shell of the bumper because the 2 bolts that were still inside the clevis were bigger than the hole. And then it bent the entire outer shell of my bumper outwards about 1/2 inch. So this pull was so hard, it twisted my bumper, twisted my frame horn, sheared the metal bracket holding the recovery point in place, stripped out 2 grade 8 bolts from their mounts, and allowed the clevis to come out about 2 inches out of the bumper, wedge into the outer shell, which is approximately 3/16 inch steel and bend that 1/2 inch. After all that happened, the soft shackle failed on the Jeep side. At that point, the soft shackle was like, I've had enough, gave up, and the whole thing came rocketing back towards me. We were this close to having a complete reversal of this story, and a Jeep guy would either be dead or he would be with a very messed up Jeep that I'd probably be paying for right now. So that's crazy. Okay? You take that for what you will, but that is fact. That is what happened. Yes, the soft shackle was in a bad spot. 100%. That's on me. But it did take that much abuse, that all that metal got bent and torn before it gave. So that's just an interesting thought. So in talking to the company, we talked a lot about rope size. The common thought is for a kinetic rope, for my type of vehicle, 7/8 is about the appropriate size. I am not a scientist. I'm not a rope scientist. I don't know any of that stuff. This guy that I was talking to is an industry leader in recovery equipment. He's actually a director for one of the largest recovery companies that makes product in the world. And he was agreeing that the 1-inch rope wouldn't have been like the determining factor. But the other thought is, a good thing to note is that a 1-inch rope apparently isn't the right size, and I should have been using a 7/8 for my vehicle size. So another thing to keep in mind, know your equipment, know what's appropriate for your setting, and know when to dig out and to reassess and slow down. Another thing I learned, ropes can go through glass. Did you know that? Did you know a rope can go through glass? I didn't know that. I always had this assumption that kinetic poles were safe. That, yeah, the rope would spring back, but it just bounce off your vehicle and you might get a dent, but everything would be okay. You always make sure people are clear of the area, but I never would have thought a rope would have come through my glass. That's another common misconception I'm seeing out there about my incident, is people are saying, why did he have a D-ring on there? I didn't. The rope came through. The freaking rope. And it came through hard, like a rocket. So then a good topic of discussion came up, and it's like, well, a winch blanket, would that work? My personal thought on seeing that video of how violently that rope snatched back after getting yanked is that it was too violent a pull for a winch blanket to have made a difference. A winch blanket, at least the one I have, because I do have one, weighs about a pound, 2 pounds. That rope weighs several pounds, way heavier than the winch blanket, and the violence with which that was snapping back to go through glass like a bullet, not even flat glass, tilted glass, like a bullet. I don't think a winch blanket would have helped my situation. I watched a bunch of videos after the fact, kind of research, and sometimes you'd see it work for like a winch cable, but it was dependent on the placement. The best case where I saw it work was where a guy wrapped a bunch of chain around the end of the cable, and when it snapped, it just fell to the ground, but that's impractical. It's heavy. And then, but with the straps breaking, when they put one on the end, it just tossed it off. And then when they put one in the middle, it came back. And by the time it got to where the blanket was in the middle, the front had already hit the vehicle. So could it have worked? Possibly. I don't think it would have made a difference in my situation unless I had a bunch of blankets maybe, because like I said, it was so violent and the rope is so heavy already. It's heavier than the blanket. I don't see how the blanket would make much of a difference in that situation. And honestly, you don't see anyone put blankets on kinetic ropes. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. It's commonplace for winches, but not for ropes. And maybe we should make it commonplace. Maybe we should design a blanket that wraps around a rope with Velcro so it doesn't get tossed off, because that's my other thought, is it would just get tossed off from the pole and then it would come back anyway. I don't know, something to think about. Just a little nugget for you guys. Like, maybe someone should make one of those. If there's a company watching this, maybe make one. Let's see what else. The other thing I want to touch on briefly is that I did have my rope through a sleeve, and it was the sleeve end that was through the clevis on the bumper. So this end right here was through the clevis on the bumper, and the knot was facing out more towards me. And if you look at the still picture I took of when it broke, you'll see the knot no longer has a loop around it. That knot would have been really tight against that loop would have been really tight against that knot because of the previous poles. And I would have think that if it snapped somewhere else, that part wouldn't have fallen off and the whole thing would have come back. But no, there's no more loop around the knot. So the other thing to note is on the sleeve, which was through the clevis, the sleeve is not torn. The sleeve is still in decent condition. So it didn't get cut, in my opinion. Because that's another thing people are saying is you cut your soft shackle. I'm not saying I didn't. Maybe it slipped somehow, despite the tension it was under. Maybe it slipped and it cut. But if it slipped, it didn't slip with the sleeve. The sleeve didn't get cut, and the sleeve end was through the clevis. So in the picture, the knot no longer has a loop around it. So my opinion is the loop broke on the soft shackle. But that's just my opinion. It's hard to tell from looking at it. You can see kind of where the loop is, but it's like all jagged. Some parts of it do look cut, and some parts of it look pulled really hard, and I can't really tell if it snapped, cut, or what. I'm not a rope expert either, so food for thought, because I still ask that myself. Did it cut or did it snap? And I cannot give a definitive answer on that. Either way, what I've talked about hopefully will prevent this from happening to you. Okay, some nuggets to go over. I'm a big proponent of first aid, like a big proponent of first aid. I use it personally in my job. I've patched bullet holes, not very well. I've stopped bleeding. I've performed CPR multiple times. And I cannot overstate that when you need first aid, not only do you need it, you need to know how to use it. Take a class, freaking Google it, YouTube it, what have you. Learn how to use the equipment in your first aid kit. I call it ouch pouch. You call it what you want. But have a good kit. This is a Rhino Rescue kit on Amazon for $70. It has everything I needed. The only thing I would add to this is more gauze, because we used up all my gauze, and if it was a true massive hemorrhaging wound, we would have needed more gauze. But everything you need for me is in this pouch. And when you get a kit, placement is key. Don't place it in the back, in your trunk, under all your gear. You have sometimes seconds to stop bleeding, okay? Seconds. This kit needs to be accessible where you and everyone else in your vehicle can see it. I need to be able to run up to your vehicle, open the door, and see the medical kit. Because you don't have time to tell me because you're dead or dying or incapacitated. You can't tell me where you keep your ouch pouch. So I got to be able to run up to your vehicle and find it very quickly without having to dig through stuff. I keep mine right now on the back seat up on the molly up high, so when you look in any of the doors, you can look and you can see it with a quick scan, and it just rips off the Velcro attachment. I have a new setup coming where it's going to mount up high. That way everyone that sits in the vehicle sees it without even trying and knows where it is. But know how to use it, most importantly. Know how to use it. My buddy knew how to use it. I knew how to use it if they couldn't. And another guy, I mean, he came up with an AED. He obviously knew what he was doing too. So stuff is important. Don't worry about spending the money on a good kit. Spend the money. Your life could depend on this little pack. I thought mine did. And last, communication. I had a ham radio in my Bronco. I also had a GMRS radio. I had both radios programmed to flip over to a repeater channel to get a message out urgently, if needed, to the local repeater that we needed help. That's for a medevac, helicopter ride, emergency care, to get a message out. Whatever you need, you can get that out. Now, a lot of people don't have repeaters in their area and they use an inReach device or Garmin or something like that. Anything you can get is important. If you need to communicate an urgent message, you have to do it. Otherwise, your only option out in the wilderness is drive out. So I was lucky I had all that stuff. Didn't end up using it because the guy that pulled up after the event ended up doing all the calls. He was a ham guru and he had all the equipment in his Jeep ready to go. But that brought something to my mind is I don't have all my radios programmed to those repeaters and nobody knows how to use them except for me. So from now on, the Baofangs are really cheap. I'm going to get a dedicated Baofeng, mount it up top, make sure the battery is always charged, and that's going to be already set to the local repeater for my area. So I can mark it with a piece of red tape and just say, hey, go grab that radio, turn it on, call for help. Get my coordinates, whatever you need to do, call for help. Maybe even have that brief conversation before we start going so they already know what to do in case I can't give them instructions at the time. But the moral of the story, I'm not saying you have to do what I do, but moral of the story is just have communications of some sort that work no matter where you are in the world for your situation, and have a plan on how to use them, and have at least one other person dedicated that knows how to use it too. So if it's you, they're not kind of fumbling around trying to figure out how to communicate and use their iPhone 14 to find a satellite and send out a cheap message that says help. Like, that's not going to get you help quick. You need communication. That's pretty much all the learning points I had. If I would look back on the situation, I would have slowed it way down. I would have gotten out and assessed, would have communicated, would have either dug out and winched forward or winched backwards. And I would have used a different point for recovery, and I would have grabbed a better quality soft shackle. And that's what I would have done differently looking back. Hindsight's 2020. I was rushed. I was confident. I thought I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I did not know the entire situation of how my Bronco was stuck and how badly it was stuck on the passenger side. And it happened. And praise the Lord, I'm here today to talk about it. My goal with this is that you share it. Please share it. Spread the word. Spread the video. Spread the full story, not a mutilated version, but the full story, so that people see the risks involved and understand the importance of everything talked about, so we can help prevent this from happening to someone else. It was a horrible experience. I'm still waiting on the bills, and I would wish this on nobody. So thanks for watching. Cool your ash, pack your trash, and I'll see you on the trails, because I am just getting started.